Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And in today's video, we're going to answer the question of what World War II warship received the most modernization during its career. The Iowa-class battleships definitely need to be on a top 3 list, or probably a top 2 list, of the most modernized warships in history, going from analog gunships to being armed with missiles in the 1980s, 40 years after they were originally designed, is a really impressive and incredible achievement. But this is on extremely massive ships that had a lot of reserve of buoyancy to make additions and changes over time. Today, we're at the ship that I believe represents the class that received the highest level of modernization of any World War II warship. This is USS Sarsfield. She is one of a handful of Gearing-class destroyers that have been preserved as museum ships around the world. In American service, she was commissioned just before the end of World War II. The Gearing-class destroyers was the ultimate design of destroyers, and some people would argue the ultimate warship design of World War II, the most effective combatant to be produced during World War II. And most of the class, while being World War II designs, don't come out until after the war. Sarsfield, barely before the war ends. She serves in American service for a number of years. She gets the Fram 1 modernization. And then she's transferred to Taiwan, where we are today in Tainan, one of the major cities on the island of Taiwan. And she goes on to serve in that Navy for another number of years, and the Taiwanese Navy do some really incredible upgrades to this ship. One thing I like about the museum is the ship serves as Taiyang in Taiwanese service, but all of the Taiwanese ships that we've seen still have their American names welded on the fantail. Now here, you can see they welded out a plate right there at the stern. The steel wasted through and they had to crop it out, but they still painted the name on there where it should have been. No idea why that's a cultural thing, why they don't cut the American name off when they make it into a Taiwanese ship. Would be completely appropriate, but I do like seeing the original American names on these ships. In the late 70s and early 80s, the Chinese Navy was nowhere near as powerful as it is today, and they were largely using the early Soviet bloc ships with relatively limited capabilities. The Taiwanese Navy was using primarily American World War II built ships, but the Chinese were starting to roll out early missile systems on their ships, and the Taiwanese were not at a point yet where they could commission purpose-built missile ships like they would eventually with American Oliver Hazard Perry or Kidd-class frigates and destroyers. So they come up with a modernization program known as Wu Qin, which was going to upgrade their World War II built American ships to a variety of standards depending on the ship and the condition it was in. And they had 3 different sub-variants, Wu Qin 1, 2, and 3, that update these ships. For 7 of their Fram 1 Gearing-class destroyers, they chose to do a fairly homogeneous upgrade package called Wu Qin 3. It was the most sophisticated of these upgrade packages, and it essentially turns a World War II built Gearing-class destroyer into a guided missile destroyer and bought that class of ships 15 more years of life and relevance. This is incredibly similar to what the US Navy does with the Iowa-class battleships just a few years earlier. In the early 1980s, when the US Navy is modernizing the Iowas, is when Wu Qin 1 comes out, and by the late 80s, when Wisconsin is commissioned, they're doing the 6-month-long upgrades on the Wu Qin 3 variants, like the former USS Sarsfield got here. This upgrade package was incredibly robust and maintained the multi-mission capability of these ships. They retain surface firepower, they remove all the original 5-inch guns and replace them with the single 3-inch gun, the Otto Malerta 76mm, like you see on Perry-class frigates. That would have been at the bow. It's worth pointing out that the weapon system that you see on this ship today as a museum is different from in her final configuration, because many of those modern systems that were installed on this ship in the late 80s, early 90s were removed before she was turned into a museum to be reused on other more modern vessels. So you're seeing a kind of chimera. We might talk about that more in a future video. She retains surface firepower. They add some 40mm guns, not the old World War II style Bofors, but a more modern version. Does a very similar role to the 25mm Bushmasters that New Jersey gets around the same time period. It's got some heavy anti-ship firepower. They add much greater anti-aircraft capabilities to these ships. They get a single phalanx here on the fantail, roughly where you see the 5-inch single mount, which a Gearing-class destroyer like this one would have never had. But she gets a phalanx for close-in defense. She gets a sea chaparral, which is taking Air Force Sidewinder missiles, putting them on an Army quad missile launcher mount, and then putting them on a Navy ship. And those two fill a close-in defense role. 2 to 3 miles away, they can engage missiles or aircraft. But then they also added coffin-type launchers for standard missiles, SM-2s. SM-2s are what the Perry-class frigates are shooting. They're what modern Arleigh Burke and Ticonderoga-class destroyers and cruisers are shooting. Instead of vertical launch tubes, they went the same route as the battleship modernization went, and they just took box launchers, coffin launchers is what you call this particular variant, and dropped them on the deck of the ship. Likewise, they added anti-surface missiles, a Taiwanese variant that fulfills a similar role to harpoons, and they retained all the anti-submarine capability that these ships had during their FRAM upgrades, including the ASROC torpedo launchers and the triple torpedo tubes. They even converted the old Dash helicopter hangar into a hangar for a manned anti-submarine helicopter that could carry a dipping magnetic anomaly detector. So these ships really do become like multi-mission guided missile destroyers with, when I say similar level of capabilities to a modern Arleigh Burke destroyer, I mean they can fulfill the same type of missions. They have very similar types of missiles to do those missions. Now, obviously, this ship is less than a third of the displacement and 80 years old by the end of her career, but they still put a tremendous amount of capability into these old ships, and I might add, more capability than the Iowa-class battleships got. The Iowa-class battleships never got that anti-submarine capability. They never got that kind of air defense capability. They were purely surface warships, while Sarsfield got a true multi-mission guided missile destroyer capability on a World War II hull. And incredibly, after those modernizations in the late 80s, early 90s, the 7 ships of this class were able to serve more than a decade each into a time period when more modern American-built ships or foreign-built ships could be acquired by the Navy. So it filled that capability gap for a decade during a time when the Chinese Navy didn't have anything significantly better than this. And as the Chinese Navy started to roll out better ships, the Taiwanese Navy was also able to do that. Of the various ships that received these modernizations, the former Taeyang, USS Sarsfield, is the only one that has been preserved as a museum ship, and she's the only museum warship in Taiwan. So we're super excited to come out here. We're actually filming this video before we get on board, so the ship's about to open. We're going to get our tickets and go on board, and it'll probably be another video in the near future, so stay tuned for that. This is the very first foreign museum ship that I've ever gotten the chance to visit. You'd think I would have gotten something closer to home. But what are some other foreign museum ships you think the channel should go and check out in the near future? Let us know in the comments section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, as well as from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below for ways you can donate to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.